the future of aerospace in Oklahoma and the governor's race in Oklahoma. Hi, I'm Chris Casteel in the Washington Bureau of the Oklahoman. I'm here today with Lieutenant Governor Jeri Askins, who's in Washington, D.C. today, meeting with the Aerospace States Association, a group of a lot of state elected officials, mainly lieutenant governors, I think.
That's correct. Lieutenant governors and lieutenant governor appointed delegates who are also members, as well as our associate members, which are industry.
And you moderated some panels yesterday on Capitol Hill about aerospace, a major concern for a lot of states because it's big, especially in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa.
You know, it is a big issue, and that's why Oklahoma, I'm delighted to have a strong influence with Aerospace States Association. Our hearings on Capitol Hill this year occurred yesterday. There were 3 panels. I had the privilege of being the moderator for the entire afternoon. We had panels on science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM education, and how necessary it is if America is to be able to continue to educate workers to be prepared to go in the pipeline to replace the workers that are going to be retiring in the baby boomer generation. The second panel was on aviation, talking about where the United States is right now, about the next generation air traffic management system, or next gen, and what can be done to help spur interest and influence in making sure that the next generation of air traffic management covers all components and could have a significant impact on Oklahoma and the Mike Monroney Center at the FAA. The third panel was on space, dealing with civil space and commercial space travel, as well as like NASA and the kinds of benefits that develop because of space exploration and what the United States needs to do. And I believe there is some money in the stimulus package that will be productive for NASA and perhaps give us a jump start.
You know, back in the 60s, I think there was probably, in the early days of the space program, there was a lot of national enthusiasm, and I assume kind of an attendant increase in students interested in going into fields related to that. Is that just totally dropped off? I mean, it seems like the economy and kind of dictates sometimes where, students, their focus, whether it's in financial systems.
You're exactly right. You are exactly right, Chris. And I think that the interest that sprang up in the 60s was a direct result of then President Kennedy's urging that the United States was going to beat Russia and landing a man on the moon, and so the race for space. And so you saw a country get behind that initiative, and a lot of enthusiasm was generated. Our discussions in the last few years have been about how do we get that same hook on the young people of today. We cannot wait until they are juniors or seniors in high school to be able to let them know what aerospace and aviation opportunities exist. Trying to come up with opportunities to capture the imagination of an elementary school student or middle school student, we believe, rest with us being able to capture the imagination of the educators at those levels and be able to show them how they can use aerospace problems and aerospace ideas in developing their curriculum to help generate interest for this next generation of workforce. A lot of people in Oklahoma really don't understand that Oklahoma has about 1 in 10 jobs that's directly or indirectly related to aviation, aeronautics, or aerospace. It's more than just the Air Logistics Center or Tinker Air Force Base. It's more than the FAA. It's more than the maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility of American Airlines in Tulsa. Oklahoma has about 400 companies that are involved in aerospace. Many of them, most of them, manufacturing companies. A lot of those are subcontractors with the Department of Defense. So Oklahoma has a deep and rich history already embedded in aerospace and aviation. We want to continue to build the workforce so we can keep those jobs in Oklahoma in the future.
Do you talk much in the Aerospace States Association about the future of commercial space travel? I mean, is that just real far in the future? Is that just totally unfeasible right now?
It is part of the discussion. Mostly the members that we have are focused right now on the travel that we have, but you see states that are developing space programs, space ports. Recently, the Oklahoma and the State Chamber hosted a conference on unmanned aerial vehicle systems, which are anywhere from large unmanned aircraft that could be used in surveillance or in the war effort, as well as very small components of unmanned vehicles that can be used to help, for border patrol, or can be used in surveillance of drug interdictions. And so there are many possibilities of what can be used, and it really runs the gamut. And Oklahomans should be very excited that our state is involved in these discussions and is looking at how we can develop the industry further.
You mentioned the stimulus package, and I know Oklahoma isn't hurting as much as most states, although there is expected to be a fairly sizable budget gap this year. Do you see the stimulus package possibly helping fill that gap? Is it going to help in areas like infrastructure and education?
I think from an infrastructure standpoint, we know specifically that it will help with roads and highways. The nearly $500 million, it's not quite that much, $450-something million that is coming through Oklahoma to the Department of Transportation gives us an opportunity to move some projects forward that were already shovel-ready.
Right.
Engineering, environmental studies already done, and so they were ready to be able to be turned. There is a small portion of that money, as I understand it from my conversations with Gary Ridley, the director at the Department of Transportation, a small portion of that money will be available to counties for some county road projects as well. Some of the other areas of the stimulus package, I know that Governor Henry has tasked his staff to look at specifically how it will impact Oklahoma and how we can best use those dollars.
Right.
Clearly, the money comes through the governor's offices all across the country, as opposed to being available for appropriation by the legislature. Right. I know that this week that the Sandy Garrett's office and her colleagues from around the state, her peers,
Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Correct, that they are in D.C. to have conversations about the education component of the stimulus package, and that they will be meeting with the new Secretary of Education to determine what leeway, what restrictions, what guidelines will be required for that component. Hopefully, we can use it for some one-time expenditures, perhaps technology, the kind of an educational infrastructure. The big concern I know from discussions with the governor is that we do not want to use this money in a way that creates a larger hole when the federal dollars are dissolved.
Down the line.
So we have to be smart about how we use it. The fact that we are not in the budget, the huge budget problems that other states have, I think gives us a little more flexibility in our use.
You travel around the state quite a bit. Obviously our unemployment rate is much lower than most states, but I mean, are we feeling the impacts of the recession there?
I think we are, and our unemployment numbers are going up. Agreed, they are not as high as other states, but since Oklahoma had been low to begin with, any increase in that number is a significant impact.
Sure.
We do have people that are losing their jobs. We have to work harder to be able to help them find alternative positions, and you know, many people are choosing to take a job where they are underemployed for their skill and training, just so they can continue to help their family make ends meet.
The governor's race seems to be starting kind of early, at least in terms of the number of people who are indicating strong interest, or even outright saying they're in. You're among them. You and State Attorney General Drew Edmondson look to be candidates in the Democratic primary next year. Congresswoman Mary Fallon has made it clear that she's in next year, possibly former Congressman J.C. Watts, possibly current Congressman Tom Cole Norman. There's a poll out in the Tulsa World today about name recognition, said that you were, I guess, just less than half name recognition in the state, but you got a long ways to go. Does that seem insurmountable to you? Are you encouraged, discouraged by that?
I'm quite frankly very encouraged by it, and that's not inconsistent with surveys that we conducted ourselves. It's a lot better than the position I was in when I started my race for lieutenant governor, and I consider that a positive.
Do you explain again? It's a long way out. I mean, a year probably before you're even really campaigning heavily. But do you expect the economy to be the #1 issue in Oklahoma then?
Yes, I do. And one of the reasons that I announced early is I wanted it to be clear that I'm not waiting to see if there's a turnaround in Oklahoma and that times will be easy before I make my decision. I expect times to be tougher in 2010 and beginning in the new administration of 2011. I think it'll be tougher than it is right now. And so I think knowing that and being able to visit with people around Oklahoma about what their expectations are and where the state of Oklahoma can go is really one of the reasons that I'm running for governor. Tough decisions are going to be required, and someone who has a track record of making tough decisions like I have, I believe is who the people will choose.
Does it seem early to you that a lot of people are getting out there? I mean, do you think that it's just the natural, because of the speculation, people are going to ask and you're going to have to answer? I mean,
people had been asking since we began our term as lieutenant governor, and all through 2007 and 2008, I indicated that I would announce my decision after the 2008 election cycle. I announced in January because I felt it was important to lay that on the table before the legislative session began, and it still was consistent with the time frame of which I had told people.
Well, good luck, and thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And look for more in the Oklahoman.